I just spent a week fly fishing in Alaska with my best friend. We went after salmon and trout. We even chased some grayling. And while we had some success, the trip proved pretty challenging in a few different ways. On today's show, I'm going to share the stories and lessons I learned that apply not just to fishing in Alaska, but fly fishing anywhere for any kind of fish. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone. Presented by Ventures Fly Company.
Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled and I am your host, Alex Stolz. Today we're switching things up because we have Spencer here. He's come down to the beehive, what do you call it?
The backed up, bedraggled beehive state.
So Spencer just got back from Alaska, so I'm hosting this week. We're going to pound him with questions and he's going to tell us everything that he learned on his Alaska trip.
Everything?
Everything. Every single thing. Did you bring a sleeping bag?
Did you pay for that? I don't know if you could afford to learn everything.
We're going to wings after this. We'll call it even.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, we're going to live vicariously through Spencer this week as he imparts his knowledge that he's gained and his wisdom on an Alaska adventure.
Well, I guess that's what's going to happen then, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm hosting, so that's what is happening this week.
All right. Well, I'll just start telling the story then.
Let's go.
So I'm going to tell the story, and I've got some points I'm going to pull out as I go through the story about the trip and educate y'all. Just some stuff that applies not just to my experience in Alaska, but lessons that we can take and hopefully apply to every fishing situation. And then I'm sure you're going to have questions for me, right, Alex?
So many. I created an entire spreadsheet. We're ready.
You guys don't know how true that is. Alex has a little bit of what I would call a love affair with spreadsheets. It's kind of dangerous.
All right. Tell me if this is right. Like, sometimes you just got to start on a fresh new sheet, you know? Like, turn a new page. All the guys here at VFC make fun of me because I start a new spreadsheet for everything.
And then we never know. Where was that?
What spreadsheet is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a problem. So, all right. Well, let's get into something more interesting than spreadsheets.
Yeah. So how long were you in Alaska?
7 days?
7 days.
7 days. I flew in on a Saturday and I flew out on a Saturday.
So when you're, this is a question we get all the time. When you're prepping for a trip like this, what does that entail?
It entails looking through all my gear and realizing that I have way too much crap. Because I don't know if you know this, you can't take 46 fly rods with you to Alaska.
I had no idea.
No, you could, but Alaska airline is going to ding you.
They screw you.
Dude, it was $80 to bring the salmon back that I caught. It was outrageous. I can't believe it was that much.
The problem is I don't have a baseline to compare that to. It's like, oh yeah, bringing salmon back from Alaska.
Well, it's just another checked bag, but they charged me $80 for it.
Okay, yeah, that's excessive.
I was like, I could have FedExed this to my house. Granted, I don't think FedEx can find Wyoming, so it wouldn't have helped. But as anybody who's tried to ship anything to Wyoming will know, it's impossible to get anything there.
All right. So other than the gear, what went into prepping for this trip? Like, say somebody wants to go to Alaska, what do you do?
So we went up, and this is actually one of the tips. One of the lessons I was going to pull out. I went up, I flew into Fairbanks, met up with my best friend, Lander Crook. And he's lived in Fairbanks for a few years now, works for one of the cruise companies up there. So he gets discounts on the bougie hotels.
Local knowledge.
Yeah. We got to stay in the bougie hotels for super cheap. It was
nice.
We felt like part of the glitterati for once in our lives. But we'd planned this trip. We wanted to go get salmon. My wife loves salmon, so I had to go catch some salmon for her. So the trip was, let's go catch some salmon. And then we're going to drive north because the salmon aren't up in Fairbanks. We had to go all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula. It's like 500 miles from Fairbanks.
Oh, gosh.
And yeah, so we flew into Fairbanks.
How long is that drive?
Long.
Paved road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's paved.
That's nice.
It's not that. Alaska's not Wyoming, Alex. All right. There's paved roads in Alaska.
All right.
Their pavement sucks, but they're paved.
I'm learning new things every day.
No, we got down there and we decided we were going to hit the salmon and then we were going to fish our way back to Fairbanks and try and do trout and Dolly Varden as we fished our way back to Fairbanks. And then we were going to end. There's this beautiful Grayling River that we know of that's pretty deep in the interior, and it is a pain in the butt to get to, but the Grayling in there are huge. And that's what we wanted to end the trip on. Every time that Lander and I have fished in Alaska together, we fish that river, so it's kind of a tradition now. And we've caught 22-inch Grayling, which that doesn't sound super impressive, but for Grayling, that's massive.
That's huge.
Yeah, especially when you consider a lot of them here in the Rockies are like 8-9 inches. So,
If that.
yeah, they're dinky. So
salmon, trout, Dolly Varden, Grayling.
yes,
That's the journey you're taking us on.
we laid it out. So I got the gear. We laid out where we were going to go. And I mean, at that point, it was just get up there and because you can read a fishing report and try and get a sense of what's happening, but the fishing reports it's not as good as going into the fly shop. Like one of the local fly shops around me in Wyoming, their fishing report for one of the rivers has stayed the same for the last 4 months. I haven't memorized word for word because when I go to check and see, hey, what are the flows at? I look at the fishing report too, and it's been the same word for word for like 4 months. So fishing reports can be helpful, but it always pays to go talk to people. So all I knew was we're going to fish for sockeye and we're going to fish for trout and dollies, which means I needed some egg patterns and flesh flies, which I have from previous trips. And then Grayling, they're going to take trout flies. They're going to take caddis. There's a big mayfly hatch going on, so I had some mayflies with me and just nymphs to imitate that stuff. So I took the whole kit and caboodle with me, waders, boots, whole 9 yards. I won't wet wade in Alaska because it's cold.
Fair.
Yeah, it rained the whole time. That's a theme of the trip. But the point, the lesson that I wanted to pull out from that, does that sound like a lot?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any fishing trip where you're traveling and you have gear and you need to book places to stay, it's a lot.
But like focus just on the fishing. Does that sound like too much?
Like
salmon, trout, Dolly Varden, Grayling.
Maybe. I mean, seems kind of ambitious.
We tried to cram way too much into this we should add 2 weeks. Would have been better.
Okay.
Because it would have given us more time on each fishery. We spent 3 days on the Kenai River, which wasn't nearly enough. And then we spent 2 days between Cooper Landing and Fairbanks, and then another 2 days fishing the Fairbanks area. So it wasn't nearly enough time on each river. That's the tip that I'd give to people who are making their first few trips fly fishing, especially if you're coming out west for the first time or wherever you're trying to go. Spend more time on fewer waters, and I think you're going to have a better experience.
I've actually been thinking about that a lot this summer because we do jump around from river to river. And
what? Us? No, never.
Yeah, we'll be at a river and it'll be slow fishing, and Spencer's like, "Hey, you know where we could go? How about this river that's like 8 hours away on the other side of the state? It's probably fishing better over there right now."
Well, you got to do it for the gram. Do it for the content.
Fish is always better on the other side.
It is. But yeah, we do hop around a little bit too much. And Lander and I hopped around a little bit too much on this one. So if I could redo it, I'd probably just focus all on the Kenai Peninsula for the week, or I would have focused on the Fairbanks area. But my wife wouldn't let me home if I didn't bring salmon back. So we kind of had to go down and catch the salmon.
Compromise.
Yeah, that's what marriage is about, right? That's what I've heard. I wouldn't know. I don't have to compromise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the plan. But like every plan, it didn't really survive first contact with the enemy. So we left Fairbanks on, I think it was a Saturday night. We drove Fairbanks down to Denali National Park. We stayed there. And then we got up to finish the drive down to Kenai, which was another 8 hours, I think. Maybe more than that.
Oh, gosh. So how long were you in the car?
All told, we were in the truck for 36 hours, 1,500 miles.
Dude. In 6 days?
7. But that includes like running errands and...
I don't care. That's a lot of driving for 7 days.
It was a lot of driving. But
okay. So we're back to that lesson of stick in one place and fish that for a while.
Exactly.
Okay. More enjoyable.
we got up Sunday morning, finished that drive down to the Kenai, and we had to stop to explore a few streams on the Denali Highway. So in Alaska, there's a road system that goes from like the Canadian border over to Fairbanks, then it goes down to Anchorage through Denali, and then all the way to the end of the Kenai Peninsula in this little town called Homer. And the road system breaks at this place called Delta Junction, where you can either keep going west towards Fairbanks, or you can go south down to Valdez. And then, so you've got basically two main north-south highways in the state, and this is what's paved. So we got two north-south highways, one going from Delta Junction to Valdez, and then from Fairbanks to Anchorage. And then in between these two highways, you've got another road that goes east-west. That's called the Denali Highway. It goes right through the middle, well, not through the middle, but right through the Alaska range of mountains. And the Alaska range is the border. Anything north of it, rainbow trout are native, but grayling are. And anything south of it, rainbow trout are native. And so we get up into this part of the Alaska range, and every little creek that crosses the road has a boatload of grayling and Dolly Varden in it. So you can go catch a whole bunch of them. And actually last year we drove that whole road and we pulled over. We caught grayling at like every single stream. It's a 120-mile dirt road, and we fished the whole thing in 2 or 3 days. Anyways, so we were down on the west end of the Denali Highway for a minute, fishing for a bit Sunday morning, and Lander caught a couple grayling to start the trip off. So we were on the board already.
Starting off hot.
Yeah, nothing. They were only 10, 12-inch grayling, nothing to write home about. Pretty fish, but nothing big. And then we hop back in the truck, and we're cruising south. We get to this little spot called Talkeetna. And there was another stream that we wanted to check out because I'd heard from somebody that this stream supposedly had some nice trout in it, some big trout. So we're like, oh, we're going to go check that out. So we take this dirt road just off into the forest, and I hope that it's right. I have no idea if it is or not, but I was like, this is what the directions say, so
I mean,
let's
that's
go
a
there.
good first step in a fishing trip. So
It is. And we found the creek, but it was a bust.
what was just
Either the fish weren't there or we couldn't catch them. I don't know which one it was because remember, we still had to get all the way down to Soldotna, Alaska at that point. So
how are the river conditions?
It looked great.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Looked great. The fish just weren't, they just weren't cooperating for whatever reason.
All right.
But as we're going back to the main highway, Lander's truck starts making this awful noise, this screeching noise, like nails on a chalkboard. Okay, do the kids these days even know what a chalkboard is?
No.
Probably not, to be honest with you. Well, we couldn't figure out what was going on, so we pull over and we're looking at the truck, and it sounds like it's coming from the wheels. So we're looking at the wheels, and lo and behold, and you've driven a few dirt roads in your life, Alex. I'm surprised this hasn't happened to you. Maybe it has. You just didn't tell me. But there was a little rock about yay big. For those of you not watching, like, I don't know, what is that the size of? Like
inch.
Inch. Tiny little rock that was stuck in between the brake rotor and the dust shield for the brake rotor. But the only way to access that was to take the tire off.
Fun.
Yeah, so we had to take the tire off, pull that out, and it was fine.
That's
as
crazy.
soon as we did that.
I've never had that happen.
Yeah, so that was a pain in the butt. I've never seen the rock just perfectly bounce in there and get stuck the way that it did, but it did. So that was something. So much fun. Just love that. And anyways, put the tire back on. We got going. We stopped in Anchorage. We got some supplies. We went to Costco, your favorite store ever.
What a great trip.
And
wow. This Alaska adventure was just fantastic.
I wanted to gouge my eyes out. All right. It was crowded.
Did you get a rotisserie chicken?
No.
Did they have those at the one in Alaska?
Yes.
Wow.
We got protein shakes, we got beef jerky.
Thank you, Mr. Costco, for shipping those rotisserie chickens all the way to Alaska.
We got goldfish because I'm still 5. And what else do we get? We got some protein bars.
Huh?
Yeah, we loaded up.
Protein.
Yeah. And we finally make it. This Sunday night, we finally made it 400-something miles to Soldotna, Alaska, which is a little town right on the Kenai River. It was about 8 o'clock.
Dude, I'm already tired just listening to this.
I'm already tired telling the story again, man. We dropped all our stuff off at the hotel, and it was we were both so antsy. Lander and I are both pretty laid back fellers, and I'm a little more high strung than you are, but you and I, Alex, are both pretty laid back, right? We're easy to get along with. By the end of this drive, we were both so ready to be on the water, we were yelling at each other for over nothing. It was like, it was bad. So we show up and we just drop our stuff off at the hotel and go straight to the river to start fishing for salmon. Now, have you ever fished for sockeye before? You ever done that?
No, never.
Yeah. You're familiar with what that involves?
Not really.
So it's not really fly fishing, because what you do when sockeye salmon come into fresh water, they don't eat anymore. They quit eating and they've put all their energy on spawning and creating more little sockeye to go out there and dominate the oceans. And the only way to catch them is, as they do swim upriver, they'll actually open their mouths. I don't know why, but they'll open their mouths as they're swimming upriver. So what you do is you get a big weight, like 1 to 2 ounce weight. You tie that onto your leader, and I'm using 30-pound test. Okay, these sockeye are only, I think the biggest I caught was 8 or 9 pounds.
Not 5X tippet?
No. The last time we did this, we'd fished sockeye a couple of years ago. We were only using 20-pound tests. We lost so many fish because they were breaking 20-pound line.
Jeez.
These sockeye are nuts. And I think we're less than a mile from the ocean where we were fishing. So these are fresh, angry fish that are coming into the river. Anyways, you put that weight on, and then Alaska Fish and Game mandates that you've got 18 inches at least 18 inches between your weight and your fly. And all it is just a little bucktail streamer, nothing fancy. And you throw it out there about a 45-degree angle upstream of you, and that weight makes it drop immediately. You feel it bouncing along the bottom. You follow it with your rod, and then when it gets about 45 downstream of you, you jerk really hard. And the idea is that you pull your line and your fly through the mouth of any fish that's open at that moment, and you hook them in the mouth, and that's how you're going to catch them. But as you can imagine, this results in a lot of snagged fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of foul hooks.
Yeah, a lot catching them in the belly and the tail, and you can keep them so long. The rule book says if they're hooked in the head area, you can keep them. So the head area is what it tells you.
That's interesting.
But if you hook it in the belly or the tail, you've got to throw it back. You can't keep it. Which at that point, I'm like, well, I already just ruined this fish's day. I stabbed it in the belly. You're not going to let me eat it? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's weird, yeah.
I don't get it. Anyways, I hooked 2 pretty nice fish that night, but I lost them both before I could put them in the net.
Dude, what happened? You've been doing a lot of podcast episodes about catching big fish. What's up with that?
Dude, sockeye are a whole different animal.
It's a big fish.
They don't act like big trout, man. They're
What's
angry.
different?
They're angry. Like, they're pissed off. You hook them and they're mad. I mean, granted, think of what you're interrupting them from, though.
Yeah.
They're
fair enough.
We're getting down to a little bit of Sam business going up there, and I'd be upset too. And they're just they run really hard. They jump. They shake their head. Like every little thing a trout can do to ruin your day, a sockeye does, but on an exponential scale. Because again, they're only 8 or 9 pounds, but they fight like they're double that size.
That's cool.
So, and yeah, they're really, really fun fish to hook, but wrangling them in is tough. And especially with how you're hooking them too, you can never guarantee the hook set's going to be good.
When you foul hook a trout, it's always way harder to get in. So that makes a lot of sense.
And I actually, both of these that I lost that night, I saw they were hooked in the mouth. I could see them.
Oh, man.
But again, it's like a rodeo trying to get them in. And you have to have a net to do it. Well, I guess you don't have to. There's some old timers who weren't using nets. They just walk onto the bank and drag it behind them. But I need a net because I ain't that good. Right. Anyways, I didn't catch anything. And when we got back to the hotel that night, I looked at the run counter and I saw that there were only like 33,000 fish that had gone into the river that day. So we were fishing on the tail end of the run because the day before, 60,000 fish come into the river.
Didn't you tell me like 100 and some?
Yeah, the week before we went, they got 194,000 fish in the river in one day.
Do they just have somebody there with like a clicker that's like, is that how they count them?
They use these sonar things on the north and south bank of the river, and as the sockeye swim by it counts them.
That's so interesting.
I know. It's crazy.
I like the counter idea better.
I do too.
That's
I
more
like
fun.
that. Oh, so we got up the next morning and we're like, we don't know if we're going to get into any fish because there were so few in the river. And we fished hard for 4 or 5 hours and it was nothing. Not a bite, not a bump, nothing. And
let me just tell you, everybody, Spencer was texting me at this point and he was quite devastated.
I actually don't remember that.
Yeah, you were pretty bummed. You're like, dude, we've been fishing forever and we haven't caught a thing.
Yeah, I might remember that now. Yeah. No, it was seriously so slow. And we weren't quite shoulder to shoulder, but there were tons of people. And I saw 3 or 4 other people hook up and that was it.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So it was slow for everybody, not just us. It was just slow, rough going. And so we decided we were going to head upriver that day anyways. We were going to go to this place called Cooper Landing. It's in between Kenai and Ski Lac Lakes, which are the 2 big lakes on the Kenai River. And we'd planned on going up there anyways because we were going to stay at one of those bougie hotels up there. Well, we left just to go up earlier because we're like, well, the salmon are probably all upstream. And we get up to this place, the Russian River comes into the Kenai River. We've all probably heard of the Russian. It's a pretty famous river. But where the 2 rivers meet, there's this little spot called the Sanctuary. It's this pool where the salmon rest before they continue shooting upstream. And depending on how many fish are in the river, Alaska Fish and Game will open it so you can go fish the Sanctuary. And it was open. So we went over there. We took this ferry across the river, which was $12 daggum for a 30-second ferry ride per person. And it was only good there and back. Like, it wasn't good all day. I had to sweet talk him into letting me go back on it because I forgot something in the truck. I was like, you guys going to make me pay again?
I wish they would have charged you another $12
No,
so bad.
I would have thrown all sorts of fits. I would have got a
What'd you
Google
forget?
review. A fly rod.
I mean, $12, man.
I had to go back and grab it.
Oh, Spencer.
Oh, I was so upset. But we take the ferry across. We want to be on the opposite bank, and that's where we got into really good salmon fishing. We limited out in a couple of hours.
What's the limit?
In the Sanctuary, it's 3 per person.
Okay.
Everywhere else in the river was 6, so you keep 6 a day if you're elsewhere. But the fish were all up pretty high in the river, and like I said, my wife was not going to let me come home if I didn't have salmon. I can't stress that enough. So I had to go make sure we caught salmon and brought it home for her. So we went and did that.
All right, you checked that off the list.
We did, but it was actually really interesting. Have you heard about the combat fishing up there for sockeye salmon?
Bit.
I'd never really experienced it before, but oh my goodness, did I experience it this time. It was literally, Alex, I kid you not, you know how bad the Lower Provo gets some days? This made the Lower Provo look like the most well-behaved river in the world. All right? Because you go over there and there's literally every 10 feet, there's somebody standing and fishing. And it's that way for like a mile of people just stacked up. And what was really interesting is I looked at that. We pulled in the parking lot. I could see everybody. I looked at Lander and I said, I don't know if I want to do this. This looks awful. And he's like, dude, you just flew 3,500 miles and drove 10 hours. We're going to go do it. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So he hauls me out there. And it was one of the most unique experiences I've ever had. It was so cool. I thought I was going to hate it. Everybody was super nice except for this one guy who was this big jerk because I hooked a fish and the drag wasn't set quite tight enough and it just took off downriver. And this guy's like, tighten your drag. And I'm like, I'm trying. And he's like, well, try harder. And I'm like, screw you. Anyway, but like you'd hook a fish.
So everybody's just like high-fiving, like,
woo! Seriously, they would. And they'd like pull their lines out of the water so that you could.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a very positive atmosphere. I thought it was going to hate it. I thought everybody was going to be very competitive. I thought it was just going to be more of fishing shoulder to shoulder on a trout river, but it wasn't. It was so unique. It was just fantastic. Again, other than the cigar and cigarette smoke, it was fantastic. And that was Monday. So we caught our limit. We caught to catch our limit, we had to hook like 40 fish. and it was only 6 that we'd caught in the head.
Oh my
out of
gosh.
40. Yeah, it was insane. So you're like pulling fish up through the tail. And there were quite a few that we caught that were bright red, and you're not going to keep the ones that are bright red because they're dying at that point.
Yeah.
You want to keep the silver ones. So there were quite a few that we caught in the mouth that were bright red as well. That all happened on Monday.
Okay.
The next day, Tuesday, we get up, we fish the sanctuary again. Fishing was a little bit slower, but we still put some fish in the net. We filleted all our fish right there on the bank, and we took them to a fish processor who was going to freeze them and package them so that I could pay $80 to bring them home on the plane. Thank you, Alaska Airlines.
Your wife thanks you.
Oh, we had some Sunday night when I got home. Oh,
yeah.
It was so good. Oh, it was so good. But that afternoon, we were like, all right, we got our salmon fishing done. Well, let's go exploring because the Kenai Peninsula is supposed to be home to some good trout fishing, I've heard. And we went around, we asked around at a couple of fly shops, and they told us, hey, go check out the Russian. That's where all the trout are going to be right now. Now, this is another lesson. Pull out, teach you guys for a minute. Alaska's fisheries are very seasonal. The fishing picks up when the salmon move into the rivers, because the salmon provide all the food. Because the trout are going to eat the salmon eggs, they get kicked out of the reds, and then when the salmon die, there's chunks of salmon flesh washing down the river, and the fish eat that, and that's why they get so big and fat and happy. And when the salmon aren't in the river,
lots of protein.
Yeah, a lot of protein, right? When the salmon aren't in the river, there are some places where you can catch trout year round because there's enough aquatic insect life. And it's not to say that like there's no reason to fish when the salmon aren't in the river, but it's a lot slower than when the salmon do get into the river. So it's interesting because it's so seasonal. The trout fishing is going to be really good at certain times of the year and just meh at other times of the year. And that's very similar to the fisheries here in the lower 48, except it's not dependent on salmon, but aquatic insects, right? Follow the hatches and you're going to find fish down here, right? The trout are going to react to the hatches here down in the lower 48. It's a very similar process up there in Alaska. So anyways, we go to the Russian to look around and try and find some fish. And apparently 10,000 other people decided to do the same thing that afternoon. It was so crowded. Made the lower Provo on a Saturday look like a ghost town. It was awful. We caught a few rainbows. We actually caught some fish, but they were small. And when I say small, they were like 5 inches. We were catching.
That is pretty small.
We were catching dinks. I don't know why. I found a couple big ones, and I could not entice them to eat anything. In the Russian, you can only fish one fly. So I couldn't run my hopper dropper. I was already handicapped. So I'm sitting there, and the fish doesn't want a dry fly, and then doesn't want a nymph, and doesn't want a streamer, and doesn't want an egg. And finally I said, well, I don't want to catch you. I don't care for 25-inch rainbow. I don't want you. Just lie. I wanted it bad.
How long did you fish for it?
That one fish that I could see, it wasn't 25. It was at least 20. It was a nice fish. 45 minutes. Just didn't want anything that I threw at it. It was really frustrating.
Pesky bugger.
It was. Well, it was surprising too because we hiked a long ways from the parking area, but there was somebody on every stinking corner of the river. So we just said, you know what? Let's call it early. Let's go get some food, and we can get up early Wednesday and start driving north. And it's also important to note that this is when it started raining. Tuesday afternoon, It started raining.
Tuesday afternoon starts raining.
Did not stop until Friday
Spoiler
evening.
alert. Come on.
Oh.
Lead us along a little bit. Show us some storytelling. Goodness gracious.
Well, Wednesday morning, we get up early, and we go into Anchorage first thing. We're 2 hours from Anchorage. And we meet up with a rider buddy of mine who lives there in Anchorage. And he told us about this little creek.
Writer or rider? Like
oh my gosh.
Bull rider or
a fly fishing writer. A fly fishing author. Is that better for you?
I was getting excited here for a second. We got a bull rider getting in the story? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, lame. Fly fishing writer.
Yeah, fly
Just like
fishing
you.
writer friend of
Okay.
mine. I know, right? Who wants to read that crap? Well, he told us about this little creek that we need to fish, and he showed me pictures of 30-inch rainbow trout that he's caught from this creek.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I actually texted a couple of them to you,
I know.
and you were really excited about it, and I was
Well,
really excited about
You
it.
texted it to me without any context whatsoever. I just get this picture of the guy holding the 30-inch rainbow trout, and I'm like, okay, cool, it's Alaska. And then I'm like, how big's the river? And you're like, it's a small stream.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Not very big water. So they call it a creek up there. I'd call it a river here,
Okay.
but it still wasn't very big. So maybe 20-ish feet, maybe 30. I don't know. I'm terrible at estimating that stuff.
We'll call it a 25.
Yeah, it was right there. But that creek was a little bit too far to get to in one day. So we said we'll hit it first thing Thursday morning, and there's a bunch of streams in the Anchorage area that have trout and dollies in them. So we were like, we're going to go fish those. We're going to have some fun, hopefully find them, especially the salmon we're in. So we assumed the trout fishing was going to be good. But here's another little lesson. I'm going to pull out from the narrative for a minute. I don't care if you're fishing for salmon or bass or pike or yellowfin tuna or goldfish. Reading water is the best skill I think any angler can develop, because there's an idea out there, I think, where a lot of people assume that Alaska is this wild place where the fishing is just a piece of cake because the fish don't get pressured very much and you don't really have to work for it. Now, if you hit the salmon run just right, that's not terribly far off from what it can be. That Monday that we fished the sanctuary, it really was. There was a space there where I was catching a big sockeye on every single cast, which that was amazing. It was the best salmon fishing I've ever had in my life. But even with the salmon fishing, you still got to identify the water where they're going to be as they make their way upstream. Sockeye are easy because they like to run very close to the banks. So you just fish close to the bank and you'll be in business. But that lesson still applies to dollies or trout or grayling or whatever it is. You've got to be able to read the water to figure out where those fish are going to be.
Would you say it's pretty similar to trout with the grayling and the dolly and the
Yeah, it's the same idea where
Okay.
you want
seams?
seams, pools, runs, riffles.
Okay.
And the one exception is if you get into these creeks and there's a lot of salmon in them, the other fish will tend to be stacked up behind the salmon, eating the eggs that get kicked off the reds.
Okay.
So that's the only time that you want to break the rule and fish water that may not be ideal, because if there's a big pot of salmon, there's a very good chance there's a lot of trout behind it. Well, remember how I said it was raining?
Yeah. Tuesday morning it started.
Mm-hmm. By the time we got to this little stream Wednesday mid-morning-ish, it was raining. Like, I questioned whether we needed to build an ark to survive this. It was raining so much that I left all the camera gear in the truck except for the GoPros, because I didn't want to ruin it. I did not want to come back from Alaska and tell Alex, hey, our fancy cameras that you got me, they're all broken now because of the water.
It's a wise move.
Yeah. I didn't want to do that to you. So we trudge through the forest. We get to this river, and it is stuffed with salmon. They are everywhere. I look at Lander, and I tell him, man, this is going to be the easiest fishing of the whole trip right here. We're going to catch so many big fish, and we're just going to be up to our butts in big old rainbows and dollies, and it's going to be fantastic.
Sunshines and rainbows.
Right? Well, all we caught was one little rainbow about 10 inches long that Lander hooked.
What's up with that, bro?
It was bizarre. It made almost no sense because we could see the salmon. We were fishing right behind the salmon. Trout just were not interested. The salmon weren't even interested.
Could you see trout at all?
You couldn't, but that didn't dissuade me too much. The river was a little off color.
Okay.
You could see the salmon just because they were so huge.
Yeah.
You could see them moving around. Well, we get to the lodge that we were staying at that night. We talked to this old timer, and he said the creek never fishes well. The creek that we were on never fishes well when it rises really fast from rain. So I pulled up some CFS, some cubic flow per second data on that little creek, and you could see this huge jump right that day when we got into fishing. So the river had just jumped really high.
Dang it.
Yeah, it was frustrating. So that made sense, at least. We're like, okay, well, we're on the right track. We're doing the right things. So the next morning, it's Thursday morning. We get up and we're going to that place where my fly fishing writer friend
Thank you for clarifying.
told us to try. And to get there, we had to hike through this forest through something. It was like straight out of Jurassic Park. Man, it was like a legitimate rainforest. And there was a section that's so steep that we had to use ropes to descend the bank. There were ropes tied off to the trees, and you have to use them to get down. Otherwise, you're going to fall on your butt. And I've got video footage of it. And we hauled the cameras with us because, again, this is the place my buddy told me produced 30-inch rainbows. So I thought to myself, if I ruin the camera trying to get a 30-inch trout on video, I could tell Alex it got ruined before I caught the 30-incher.
That's a pretty good excuse.
And he wouldn't be as mad.
Yeah. I mean, you'd submit a formal request of apology, and I'd have to approve it, but
You'd probably approve that one,
I'd
right?
probably approve that one.
So we get into the river, and Lander and I hiked a mile or so downriver, maybe more. And you had to just hike in the river, too. The forest is so thick, there's
That's
no
always
walking
so
the
rough.
banks. So it was easy going down.
Yeah.
But on the way back, it was like working on the thigh master.
The glutes.
Yeah. Everything was burning. And we get down into the river, however far down we gone, and we got into fish just immediately. Nice fish too. Nothing breaking that
Rainbows.
nice rainbows.
Okay.
Nothing breaking a huge mark, but beautiful fish, wild native rainbows. Rainbow trout are native to Alaska, to certain portions of it anyways. Wild native fish. They were angry. They were eating eggs. They were right behind the salmon like they should be. Everything was falling into place. I even caught a big sockeye that actually ate the egg. They'll sometimes do that out of aggression.
Cool.
And a couple of pink salmon that did that as well.
Wait. Is it still raining?
Yes, it is still raining. Because there's a difference between waterproof and Alaska waterproof, which you may not notice unless you go to Alaska and get rained on for 4 days.
Well, you're talking to the guy who gets made fun of by my dad because he's like, yeah, we need to create like a sling pack that has a spot you can put a rain jacket. I'm like, rain jacket?
Yeah.
Why do I need a rain jacket when I'm fishing?
Oh, we needed it. And it's just dumping rain. We're sitting there, and me and Lander are trading off who's filming and who's fishing. And the guy filming has an umbrella in one hand and the camera in the other, trying to keep too much water off the camera. And I actually ruined one of our microphones because of that. Well, we start working our way back up the river. We're getting into fish. We're having a great time. But I started to notice something a little weird, a little off-putting. The river was rising fast. Now, I spent a lot of time in southern Utah growing up. And if you've done any hiking in the desert, you're aware of flash flood danger. And you know that's not something to mess around with at all. You don't screw with that. And I won't lie, that had me a bit worried. So I looked at Lander and I said, well, I think we got to hightail it out of here because the water's coming up this quick. We started to see like tree limbs and stuff come down. I was like, oh no, this is not good. So it was a really tough decision, but we made the decision to leave the good fishing and just go. And it was a good thing that we did because by the time there was one final crossing of that creek before we could hike back up the steep bank to the trucks. And by the time we got there, the river was a full 2 feet higher.
Oh my gosh.
Than it had been. And I almost didn't make it across. I thought I was going down. The cameras would have gone down with me. It would have been awful.
Did you at least have like Lander filming it in case you went down?
No, because he
we
would have
never
gone
heard
down
from
too.
you again.
No, we just,
dude.
I think
have you learned nothing?
I think I had the GoPro on. I think it was the only thing that I had going. Everything else,
that's good. Yeah, we just have to find your body and get the GoPro off of it.
Exactly.
We could tell the story.
So we're soaking wet. We are drenched. I haven't been that wet in a long time. And we decided we could stop and fish some stuff on the way, but if that creek was blown like that, then everything else is probably going to be in really rough shape. So we just hightailed it back to Fairbanks that night, hoping that the rain would clear out. And it actually broke a tiny bit. We had a brief respite where it wasn't raining as hard. It was still raining, but it wasn't as hard.
All right, still raining.
So we shot up the Chena River, which is right there in Fairbanks, and full of grayling, wonderful grayling fishery, probably not the best grayling fishery in Alaska, but one of the best grayling fisheries in Alaska. And we get up to where we wanted to fish the Chena, and it was like 3 feet higher than normal. I fished it in August a lot, and I've never seen it that high. It was unwadeable in some stretches. You just couldn't even get into it. But Lander eked out a tiny little fish before it got too dark. It wasn't that tiny. It was 12-ish inches maybe. But he eked that fish out. He fished hard for it though, and I was filming him the whole time, and he was grinding for it. And another little lesson, I'm going to build off the reading water thing that I mentioned a minute ago. A lot of folks assume you just go up to Alaska, you throw a fly on, and the fish fall over themselves to eat it. They're just going to jump in your net. Again, that can be true, but I'll tell you an experience. About a time, this was 2 summers ago in Alaska, where I was up fishing with Lander, and there was a big brown drake hatch going on one of those Grayling rivers. And the fish were refusing anything that wasn't close enough to a brown drake. If it was a big parachute Adams, they would eat it. But if you try to throw a caddis and get them to eat it, because Grayling normally will
not
eat,
super picky.
Yeah, they'll eat just about anything. No, they were. If it was not a brown drake, you were not getting a fish at all. That's in the middle of summer in Alaska, prime fishing time, and the Grayling were being that picky about fly choice and presentation. And shoot, there was another time too where I spent a couple weeks on Kodiak Island fishing for pink salmon in the surf. And they didn't really care too much about the fly that I threw, but if I retrieved my streamers too fast or too slow, I wouldn't hook up to them. I had to dial that retrieval speed in just perfect in order for them to eat it. So you do need to pay attention to all those little things when you go to explore a new place, not just Alaska, but anywhere in general. The rules still apply. A lot of the guidelines still apply. You're going to be doing the same things, needing to do the same things, needing to apply the same lessons and techniques that we teach here at VFC.
I was going to say, we call them basics for a reason, right? Like it provides that solid foundation that, yeah, different fisheries are going to have their different details and nuances, but the base is always the same.
It is. So the next morning, we set off for
What day is this?
This Friday morning.
What day of the 7?
Day 6.
Okay, day 6.
The next morning, we set off for a Grayling River out in the middle of nowhere. It's like a 3-hour drive from Alaska.
You guys are diehards, man.
Or from Alaska, from Fairbanks. It rained the entire drive. It was 49 degrees when we got to the river. Still dumping. It was just a little bit of a drizzle when we got there, and there was a small drake hatch going on, and the Grayling were going nuts.
Cool.
We thought finally something broke our way on this trip. The only problem was this river was the only river running at a normal flow that wasn't blown out. So everybody was on that river. But they didn't get on that river until me and Lander got there. We got there. We got into the water. We set up. And I kid you not, within 5 minutes, a bunch of trucks pull up. 7 guys get out and surround us 30, 40 feet away like we were fishing for sockeye again. It was out of control. And it wasn't my idea of solitude. I mean, we put the time and the miles in to go that far because we wanted the solitude in the big Grayling, but we didn't get it. And I was pissed. I was making mean comments to people. I was not a happy camper.
Spencer.
I know.
Your mother taught you better.
No, she didn't. And I was just not in a good mood. We'll put it that way. Lander did catch a nice 17-inch Grayling, not our big 20 inchers like we wished for. I caught one that was probably 15, 16. But we ended up calling it a little bit early because of how crowded it was. It just kind of took the
That's
fun.
wild. 3 hours out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And it sucked the fun right out of it. It sucked the joy out of being out there. And that river is interesting too, because there's one section that you can fish wading. The rest of it, you need a boat to get and access everything. So it's a pretty limited stretch, but we can usually get there and not have other people there. So we didn't really think twice about it for that reason.
All right. So Grayling, sounds like the trip was, I wouldn't say, I mean, you hit a couple roadblocks, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was a struggle. I heard Lander out there grinding a few times. I mean, was it fun? Was it successful? Would you go back? Like,
Successful? I mean, I wanted to catch big rainbows and dollies. And it's funny because I was talking to another friend of mine who lives up there, and he was down 2 or 3 days after we left the Kenai. He was down there. Said the rainbow and dolly fishing was off the hook. The switch flipped that quick.
interesting.
Just something changed and the fishing started going nuts. So successful, yeah. I mean, I wish we would have caught bigger fish and more fish, but the salmon fishing, it was the best salmon fishing I've ever had. So that part was a lot of fun. Ironically, though, as good as that salmon fishing was, everybody kept telling us, "Oh, you should have been there 2 weeks ago. It was even better." So
Crazy.
yeah, it was crazy, but we had a blast. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I go up there about every summer, spend time with Lander and get around, but we hadn't done this trip before where we said, all right, we're going to go do the salmon and we're going to drive all the way back to Fairbanks and fish, because it's just a marathon of a haul, but the salmon fishing was worth it. It was a lot of fun.
So if, like, someone who's never been to Alaska,
Yeah.
I'm sure we have a lot of listeners that have never been to Alaska. What's your pitch for Alaska? Give it to us right now.
It's the wildest country on the planet. Parts of Alaska make Wyoming look civilized. So, most unique place I've ever fished. You've got light to fish till midnight most days in the summer.
This dude was texting me at like 11 p.m. and he's like, "Yeah, we're fishing right now." I'm like, "What is happening?"
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
That part of it's cool. Just one thing you don't understand till you get there is the magnitude of Alaska. I like to say you go to the Rockies and things feel big here. God took the scale of the Rockies and just blew it up 100x, and that's what he made Alaska with.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the scenery at all in this whole podcast.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's you down on the Kenai, it's big mountains and pretty lush, more traditional type forest, and then in between you got more rainforesty looking stuff, and then you get up to Fairbanks, and it's a fight between tundra and forest still up there. You're getting into the tundra area of the state up there, so we got treated to quite a bit of it. So
cool.
Yeah. I just tell you, focus on one thing. If you want to go for trout, go up there for trout. If you want to go for salmon, go for salmon. There are times of the year when you can go and hit it and do really well for both. With Lander's work schedule, we really only had that window to go. If we'd have gone a week later, probably would have been really good trout fishing, but salmon fishing wouldn't have been near as good.
That's so interesting that it changes like that.
Yeah, it does, and it's kind of frustrating.
Well, yeah, if you don't hit it at the right time.
Yeah.
You hit it at the right time, you're like, this is the best time of my life.
I was just hoping that we were close enough to the end of the Sockeye run that I was hoping the trout and dolly fishing would have picked up. And like I said, 2 or 3 days after we left the Kenai, it did. But
it's all right. You're just adding some knowledge to the book, and you'll know for next time.
Well, I'm gonna go.
Is there gonna be a next time?
Oh, I think I might be going up in September, and I'm not gonna that creek with those giant rainbows in it. My writer friend was telling me that it fishes best in September. That's when he caught his 30 inchers. So I think I might have to go up there and pay him a visit. Try and catch me a big fish.
You're gonna ride a bull?
No, I'm not going to ride a bull. If you ask nice, I might film it.
Just kidding. It's gonna be a trout rodeo. None of this bull riding stuff.
Oh, fish like that, I don't know what I'd do. Because
Right.
the biggest trout I've caught on a fly rod was in a lake. So that's a pretty straightforward fight. I don't know what I'd do with something that
30-inch
big.
rainbow with current. Woo!
Yeah,
That's fun.
I don't know what I'd do. But
All
we'll
right.
find out.
Well, thanks for sharing all that with us.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Well, I hope so. I'm not doing it again. Well, I appreciate it, Alex.
All right, you want to sign us off?
I guess. I appreciate everybody listening to the show. If you've got any questions about the Alaska trip, let me know. There's always ways to get a hold of us in the podcast descriptions. And most episodes, we do take questions from the listeners, unless I've got something more important to say than what you guys have, which I did this week. No, I'm kidding. Come on. No, well,
We just started a new online community. You can
I was
plug
about
that.
to get to.
Oh, sorry. I was just taking on my hosting again.
No, there's always a link in the podcast descriptions for questions if you want to submit them. And then, like Alex said, we did start our new online community, Team VFC. It's like Facebook, but it doesn't suck. No political posts, no dad jokes,
No ads, no spam.
nothing from your crazy Aunt
We
Karen.
did have one crypto person try and get in there, but we
nipped
cut
that.
him out. We nipped that in the bud.
We did. We got that. It's a great place to share picks, get tips, and help from other anglers. I've been pretty surprised how active it is.
Yeah.
In the
crazy.
few weeks that we've had
It's
it
awesome.
going. It's been
Yeah.
a lot of fun. So there's a link to join that in the podcast description as well. And I think that's it. Did I forget anything, Alex?
Nope. Till next week, everybody.
Get out there on the water and live real life.
Live real life.